Eat it. Oxygen. While we Hey everyone, you've got Loralyn Mears here, your hostess of the Grit Files, sponsored by Grit Daily News. And in the house today, we've got, well, we always have amazing guests, but this one's unusual in the sense that he's been operating a successful business for over 2 decades. That's something we don't have a lot of here on the startup stories that we have, but it all starts somewhere. And when you've been around that long, you've got to continue to innovate. And the CEO of Pangea Global Technologies here, Bryan Fried, has been innovating for a long time. He's capitalizing on what's changing in the technology industry, specifically in and around commercial lighting applications for LEDs, and looking to explore new ways to do everything from growing food and addressing that shortage to sanitization to climate issues to all this kind of stuff, the big problems. So with that, hey, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Well, it's great to be here, Loralyn. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's dive right in and let's just pretend we're, I don't know, aliens, and we've just landed at your 350,000 square foot warehouse that you are testing all kinds of things. And we're saying, what does Pangea Global Technologies really do? What is smart LED and smart tech? Talk to us.
Well, here's what's interesting. The computer industry really began in the 50s. And so we've had evolutions of technology that have really changed the way we live. We've had a lot of success with technology in the home, with smart homes, with the Ring doorbell and with security systems and Alexa and being able to turn things on and off by talking to something that is inanimate. And that is all terrific. But there's now been a sea change in the world, in the greater commercial environment that we all live in, that's going to be the next big thing. It started about 10 years ago when LED lighting became popular. So what happened is when LED became really commercially viable, things changed because LED is nothing more than a couple of printed circuit boards with computer things on them lodged in a light fixture. And if we look at it, lighting is the most universally available powered location.
Bryan, can you give us a few, I don't know, funky examples of how these smart LEDs can be used with commercial applications?
So what's happening now is that technology that used to be under my desk only can now be put in a light fixture, and you wouldn't even see it. And when that started to happen, all sorts of really smart people began to innovate about what could be in that new computer that looks like a light fixture and lights your street as well. And so things like privatized Wi-Fi, where broadband has been a big deal, especially in COVID, privatized Wi-Fi, which used to only be able to be distributed by those big, ugly, nasty AT&T Verizon poles with the palm trees around them, now can actually be put in a light fixture. You don't even know it's there. And you can micro distribute it and control it to virtually any community. Or, for instance, currently in Arizona, 20 cities are experimenting with weather stations that would measure the air quality in those areas. And if it gets too bad, they automatically close air conditioning dampers so that the air conditioning is not damaged by high particulates in the area. In the Southeast, there's terrible things that have happened with flooding, as we all know, hurricane-based flooding and storm-based flooding. Well, we can detect the rise of water automatically by placing sensors in those areas. Well, the sensor data has to go somewhere. There's a light fixture nearby. So transmit that data into the light fixture that now houses the technology that brings that information into a software algorithm that says, hey, we better warn some people. And so those things are affecting how people live, are affecting all of us now. And we're just beginning to scratch the surface about what kind of utilities are available. And Well, that just happens to be, the best place to put them.
So you've had the vision on how to really embrace the future and have an extensive and massive testing facility. Can you tell us what, without revealing anything proprietary, right? We're not trying to do any little corporate espionage or any of that, but what do you think's on deck? What's the next big bet with LEDs?
Okay, well, the area that I believe is going to have the biggest influence, and the one that we here at our company are very passionate about, is food. So we have currently a global supply chain crisis that's affecting everybody on Earth. And it's not only just the ability to get goods logistically, or the fact that they cost 5 times as much to ship them, but we have a de minimis amount of natural resources like water, and that's becoming harder to access. We have a growing food problem. Now, when you add a global supply chain crisis to that, you got some serious issues that you need to deal with. Well, since LED, we've discovered that because we can build virtually any light spectrum with an LED light source, we can duplicate what the sun does with a plant indoors. Now you can grow strawberries indoors. You can grow them not only in a single footprint, but you can grow them 7 stories high if you want. That grow requires 95% less water, proportionately less fertilizer. You can put that grow environment in an old abandoned warehouse in the middle of Detroit if you wanted to. And now you don't have any shipping costs. Now you don't have any spoilage. Now you have less waste. You have less lack of freshness, all the things that we care about in our food. Not to mention it's all organic. There's no pesticides. And you can grow these things 24/7, 365 days a year. So in the dead of winter in Detroit, you can have fresh produce grown next door. Well, we couldn't do that before LED. But now with the combination of LED light spectrums that are custom tailored toward particular plants and the technology that runs them, we've got all that. We've got it right now. And we see tremendous investment in indoor farming beginning to happen. Walmart, the Tesla brothers, just to name a couple.
Oh, I love that. This is exactly the kind of thing that the world needs. Applied technology, solving really big, hairy problems like global hunger, right? Not a small problem to solve. And you said there's some increased uptick, Walmart and some of the other progressive companies that are investing in new technologies and looking for ways to deal with some of these big thorny problems. Realistically, Bryan, how far are we from seeing fairly widespread adoption by governments across the country?
Well, here's what's interesting. It's beginning to happen right under our nose. So without naming names, for example, when you go to Walmart and you buy lettuce at a number of Walmarts across the country, a lot of that lettuce is already grown indoors because we're working with the company that's doing it. That's how we know. So because it's commercially viable, it's happening as we speak all around the country.
Do you foresee any pushback? I mean, we all remember, and well, it's in fact still ongoing, the whole GMOs, genetically modified foods, and the pushback, oh, frankenfoods and this kind of thing. Are efforts being made now to educate the public that this is not a frankenfood endeavor? This is just artificial light. Any comments and ideas around that?
Oh, absolutely. What's interesting is there are a number of universities across the country that are beginning to develop departments around this, much like the University of California, Davis did one for the wine industry in learning how to grow grapes. So the whole business with GMO is to try to have weather-resistant crops or crops that are resistant to insects, particular type of insects, or molds or funguses, to promote food growth. That makes sense, but obviously there was a big backlash. Are we eating frankenfood? The beauty with growing things indoors You don't need any of those things. You don't need pesticides. There are no bugs. There's no viruses. There's no mold. You have a completely controlled environment. And so you can grow this food completely organically, completely naturally, tastes good. And when you find that great recipe, the technology allows you to store the metrics that you use to grow that, so you can keep on growing it the exact same way over and over again.
Fantastic. So let's get into business operations and things. So most of the entrepreneurs that are in our listenership are typically startups, X number of, single digit people to maybe dozens of people. Your organization is extremely large with hundreds of employees and hundreds more sales reps, not to mention all of the research and affiliate partners. So maybe tell our audience briefly about what that's like in this era of the great resignation and fighting to find staff, the war on talent, all of this stuff. As a CEO whose productivity, supply chain, customer satisfaction all depend on continuing to feed the beast, right? You got to make more and more of these smart lights and continue to provide customer satisfaction and account support. Talk to us about some of those pressures and headaches that you're feeling as a CEO.
Well, you accurately describe them as pressures and headaches, and that's pretty much on a daily basis. There is certainly a dearth of talent in our area, as well as many other areas. We are finding that the answer to that is training and is providing career opportunity for people who are interested generally in what we do, because there's no place we can go to find experienced people in this area. Of course, the COVID situation just exacerbated it. The ongoing amounts of regulation, of oversight, all of these things just make it a little bit more difficult to do business. The thing is that you have to make a plan. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you're starting out, you're interested in doing this, you can't do it on a shoestring anymore. You can't sort of cross your fingers and believe that your idea is going to come to fruition. Hope is not a plan. And so you really have to look at your vision and ask yourself, okay, what's the end game? And map each step to getting there. And all the steps are absolutely critical, from capital to infrastructure to human resources, training, however you decide to do it. It took us about 3.5 years to bring just the first beta tests to market. And then we spent a year testing, refining, vetting what we did, making sure that it was the right thing, fixing bugs, doing all those types of things. So it took us a very long time. And we had a lot of years of experience doing it.
Talk to us about the thing or things that have thrown you for the biggest loop as the CEO of Pangea Global Technologies. What just absolutely blew your mind and you thought, oh my goodness, how will we endure?
Well, we had a few. Our factory was closed because of the panic that ensued around COVID, although we had no COVID, but they did that. So that wasn't an easy thing to deal with, because we kept everybody on the payroll through the closure.
Wow, that's tremendous.
We paid everybody because we believe that a company is not brick and mortar. A company is the sum total of the people that you have contributing to it. So we crossed our fingers and said, I hope we can do this for long enough, because it's going to be tough. And that really was a very, very difficult thing to deal with. The cost of that was very difficult to deal with at a time when people were pulling in their bootstraps. So we had to totally self-fund that. And I think in the last 5 years, that was the most difficult thing that we had to broach. Currently, I think we're still wrestling with people's fears about coming back to work. And so that is exacerbating the HR issue, being able to find good people. And so we're constantly, trying to think of new ways to add talent to our staff. But I think that's going to be true for anybody, either in a startup mode or in a well-seasoned companies mode. This is the great challenge of where we are right now here today.
Now, one of the things that I also really like to ask my guests is, if I gave you an undo button, Bryan, personally or professionally, what do you change?
That's a very interesting question. We reside in the state of California, and as is not a big secret, a lot of companies have moved from California to places like Texas because California has become a more difficult place to do business. So I'm not sure that I would have kept my headquarters in Southern California if I had an undo button, if I knew what I know now. And I just hope that the situation where we live and work today begins to sort of reverse and come back to a more business-friendly environment. But that is the truth. It's a difficult truth, but that's probably my number one undo button.
There you go. It's your reality, right?
Yeah.
Operations, fiscally, all of that. Now, as we wrap up the podcast, I have our signature fun and silly question after we've talked about serious things like trying to solve world hunger. So, Bryan, my question is this. If we got to peek into your shoe closet, your closet, and there was a pair of footwear there that personified who you are as a person, as the CEO of Pangea Global Technologies, what are those shoes or footwear that we're looking at? Describe them.
Oh, that's easy. It's running shoes. There's
Okay.
no question. Nobody here moves slowly. We always have something to do that we haven't done yet. In order to be viable in this business environment, you better move fast. You better be ready to go to the next thing. And when you finished what you finished, there's about 10 other things that you have to do, and you better get to them real quick. So running shoes make perfect sense.
Perfect. With that, thank you so much, Bryan Fried, for being a guest on the Grit Files today. We wish you continued success to you and your team as you are truly innovating the most wonderful and needed commercial technologies. Thanks for being a guest on our show.
Well, thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Don't forget to follow Grit Daily News as well as me, your host, Loralyn Mears, everywhere on social media. And how about throwing 4 or 5 stars our way if you're listening to Apple or Spotify? Subscribe to our show. And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?